All set.
All right, so I am calling to order the December 14th meeting of the Library Planning Committee, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information such as instructions and guidelines for remote access by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town website. For the public portion of this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch, listen, and participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner, either through the Zoom connection or phone call. Let's see. And anybody that wishes to comment will be welcome to the meeting by Jane Kane. And so I'm calling the meeting to order.
Roll call
at
vote.
4:04.
Roll call
I have a
vote.
question. Why do we have to read that before everything? It's in the meeting notice.
For the public.
It's a requirement, at least as I understand it, it is a requirement.
This is the only meeting that that it's read at.
Now that's interesting.
But
It
go
had
ahead.
been, I know, at the planning board and all that.
Okay.
We can inquire.
Okay.
But roll call vote to approve
Yes.
the method?
Yes. So we'll have a roll call vote to approve the minutes of the,
No, to use.
oh, yes, I'm sorry. Wrong step. To use the Zoom method of holding the meeting. And Mary Reardon Johnson,
Yes.
Richard Simon,
Yes.
George Bavino,
Yes.
Linda Callahan, yes.
Okay.
So that is accepted. And then the next thing will be open it up for public comment. If there's anybody in the public waiting to speak or anything, Jane?
No, Linda.
So I think we can move on, and if somebody joins us, you could let us know. Is that appropriate? We'll move on to approval of the minutes of the November 9th Library Planning Committee meeting. And any comments or questions from people?
Comment. In number
Jane?
4, it talks about the December 6th meeting. Does it need to be more specific who hosted that meeting and what it was? Because I thought it was from the planning board, or was it land use? I think
No, it's from the housing,
housing.
Mary
Right.
Wagon and the housing committees. Mary
And-
Reardon, go ahead.
And the age friendly, the scene at the
But she hosted the meeting, Mary Wagon, right? Or was it age friendly?
sure, I think Mary did.
So because of, I didn't want to necessarily, I was advised by a certain very wise person that less information sometimes is better. So
I just wanted to make sure that if it was necessary to describe it, then we did. But if you think that it's okay the way it is, I'm fine.
well, again, we're going to talk about it today, so you'll give me all the details at that point.
Okay. So any other comments? Okay, so we need a roll call vote to approve the minutes.
Yes.
Rick-
I make
I'm
a
sorry.
motion. I think we need to make a motion. Did we already do that?
No, you're doing it. Thank you, Mary.
All right, Mary, sorry about that.
And I'll
Second.
second it. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We'll take, oh yeah, our roll call vote will be it. So Richard Simon,
Yes.
Linda Callahan, yes. George Bavino,
Yes.
Mary Reardon Johnson.
Yes.
Okay. So the minutes are approved. So we'll go on to the discussion of the December 6th Zoom meeting between myself and Jane and the library specialist from the Mass Board of Library Commissioners regarding future construction grants. Jane, do you want to start out?
I did send it out about an hour ago, if anyone.
Yeah,
had
no,
a chance.
we got to read it. Yep.
Oh, good. And, what did you think? I mean, it was a pretty robust meeting. I liked to, it was Linda's idea that we definitely have this under our belts before we meet again as the planning committee. And it turned out to be a very useful meeting.
And very positive notes in the conversation too, as far as their willingness to help us where we are right now and in the future.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the notes from Linda and my discussion, we did a Zoom meeting with Lauren and Andrea, who were the building specialists. So the concern, of course, people know, is that the last grant round still has over 10 communities on the wait list. So 6 years have gone by since that grant was handed out, and there's still a wait list of more than 10 people. So that's the bugaboo, right? We're not sure how to handle our future and what we should do with the time, line. Is there a timeline? Is there another grant round coming? All that sort of stuff. Those are the kind of questions we asked. The answer was very interesting. The specialists at Mass Board of Library Commissioners and the finance people and all that have really seen some pushback throughout the state as the result of this long waiting list and the cap that they have to stay under in order to spend the money each year, the size of the bond as it gets approved by the state legislature each budget round, and things like that. So they called it a deep dive, but they've been researching alternate ways to proceed with the grant process. And what they're saying is, sure enough, it's going to be another 3 or 4 years before they clean up the existing wait list, provided that the money stays at that level and provided that the bond is the same size each year in the budget, but it should be, and all that. But you're talking 3 or 4 years before they'll even announce another grant round. When that new grant round gets announced, whether it's fiscal year 25 or 26 or 27, we're doing our budgeting right now for fiscal year 23, by the way. When that next grant round gets announced, it's going to look a little different than it has looked for the past 40 years. And rather than having a separate planning and design round, and then 2 years after that, a construction round, they're going to meld the two processes together and provide one grant for the community, not 2 grants. And they say that that's going to be more competitive, which, Linda, made me nervous to hear that something was going to be more difficult to achieve in the future. Whatever, we'll take it one day at a time, but she said it would be more competitive. And that remains to be seen what that's going to be. But, we talked about the specifics of how one goes about applying for a grant. And I've been through it. A couple of us have been through it, and that's okay. But keep in mind that we're talking like 3 or 4 years at least, right? I think Lauren kept repeating, we don't even know, we're not sure, this is a possibility, et cetera, et cetera. So they didn't want to get our hopes up. But at the same time, they listened to what we've been doing over the past year once we got, back to meeting on a regular basis. And they had, like Linda said, a lot of positive reinforcement around what we've been doing. So we're doing the right things. We've already talked to the planning people. We're looking at available properties. We're talking with the VIPs in town legislature, in the town, leadership. And yes, indeed, we need to start building consensus if it's a village mentality that we know we're going to have to deal with. They said if you want to go ahead and get a capital amount of money, which is what we've been told by the town administrator and now the assistant town administrator in this capital budget committee, then go ahead and continue your studies. And they talked about traffic studies, And they talked about the engineering aspects of really looking at the lots and the lands and things like that. And, you know, they thought that it was okay if we wanted to go ahead and proceed with a capital request for this coming year. What else, Linda? They talked about shared use of a lot. You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, well, one other thing in the context of the more competitiveness, they were also talking that they are going to group the people that are sending, you know, intending to apply for the applications into small, medium, and large. And so I felt as though that could be to our benefit, and that we are also getting in on the first time that they are doing it this way. And I feel as though our situation would really warrant, you know, them paying attention to our situation, and that it could work in our favor. That we have not.
Can you explain, Linda, why you think it would be to our benefit? I don't get it.
Because I think before everybody was in a mishmash, and I'm not quite sure what criteria they used, whether it was first come, first serve, whether, you know, whether it was new, whether it was renovation, whether it was addition. I don't know what criteria they used with all of the people that applied, but I would think that if we were, I would think that we would fit into a medium-sized library category. I may be wrong, but I would think that that's it. I don't know how many others are in that category.
Okay.
But
So-
if we were,
So we should be looking into that?
I would think if there's a way to ask that, but I'm guessing that nothing, as I understand it, the process doesn't actually take place until there's a letter of intent. So even though right now we've been told that about 40 communities have expressed an interest in applying, we have no idea who they are, where they exist, and what they're looking for, and whether it's actually going to be an official letter of intent that is that starts the process. But then, what I took out from it was that if it gets to the point and we submit our letter of intent, we're not against everybody else that submits, but we're against just the ones within our category, which would be mid-size. And depending upon who those others are, obviously, we may be more deserving or less deserving. We won't know that until the process actually starts. So to me, I thought that that was beneficial to us, rather than just being against everybody and how they make their decisions.
Linda, do they
I
say anything about why it's going to be more competitive, and what are the competitive components?
No, but
Not
that's
at
a
this
good
point.
question.
And I'm not sure whether they've got that mapped out, since it's still a while down the road before that's going to be happening. But I would think that we would know that by the time the grant round is announced, and you would certainly write your application based on that. And they
Now,
wanted to, as I recall, they wanted to make it more similar to the what is the other group in the state? The MSBA that gives out the school grants. And that seems to be a more streamlined process, and they feel that the MBLC process should be more similar to that.
Yeah, a big part of the school grants has to do with the financial situation of the residents of the town.
Yeah.
So if you are, a poorer town, you get more money and
Sure.
easier.
Sure. And again, we won't know those specific things until the more is announced about it, because this is a brand new process. So I'm sure they're still tweaking the process. The other part, Jane, now it slipped out of my mind. The last thing we were talking about, that when you segued into me, you said to speak to something, and now I've forgotten what it was.
Well, let's see, what were we talking about?
So Jane, you asked Linda to talk about the competitiveness of the, why she thought we would be in a better.
Oh, yes. No, but even before that.
Multi-use of the law.
That's it.
Among different departments, like the
Yes,
way that we're thinking about about seniors.
Yeah,
in the-
we told her about the particular piece of property that we thought was the best choice from the point of view of the study and the planning committee. And the fact that it was also of interest to the fire department, and it has a restriction for housing, affordable housing on it. And so they talked about the fact that now MBLC will fund construction of libraries that may be in a situation like that. But the important thing to remember is that the library part of it needs to be pretty separate from the other, that it might be sharing the land or the facility with. In other words, not to have totally shared space. And I'm just using it as an example, a meeting room, because it can get dicey with two groups needing to use one meeting room, so that they would not support that. If it were a large facility and the library was on, let's say, the top 2 floors, and everything that it needed was on those top 2 floors, you just shared a structure on the ground, then they would support that. But for instance, if you wanted to have outside programming space, if it were a gazebo type thing that was separate from the main building that would be used by another group, they probably wouldn't fund that. But if it were like in the new Norwell Library, they have screened an area that is attached to the library as outdoor space, that was funded. That's just an example. And so they were encouraging us to talk to the other groups that were interested in this property and talk about timelines when they thought they might be ready to build, and how much the acreage. The other thing about the studies was the operational studies as to how the property would handle 2 operating facilities. Would it work? I guess that's probably utilities and all that.
Didn't they specifically say they needed to have separate entrances as well? The shared.
Well, I think if it were a separate entrance, I mean, you might enter, let's say it's an example, it's a 4-story building. You might go in, no, we're not, but you might go in the same front door, but you would access the library, as I understood it, if you were on the top 2 floors and you had everything you needed on those top 2 floors, that would be okay. If something else, let's say a community center or a senior center, was on the bottom 2 floors,
Well,
just as an example.
I've not heard any discussion about shared buildings.
No, not that we were planning that. They were using it as an example that they are willing to fund shared areas, so that, but they would prefer to see either a separate wing or a separate building that might be attached by a patio or something like that. They would fund the library part of it. At one point in time, I guess they didn't do that.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure it pertains to us.
Well, you know what I mean? Like in the old school, like 10 or 12 years ago, MBLC did not want to have libraries going together. Whatever, it's the history of the program. They wanted more independence.
So really that just fed into the fact that they suggested we continue doing what we're doing as far as trying to see how we might be able to fit into that space, using that space, if at all possible. We told them about the fact that it was owned by another group and all that, and so they were encouraging us not to give up, essentially. I don't know if there's anything else that
it's in the notes. If you guys read the notes and then you have questions, just call me or call Linda.
Jane, in your notes, was there something said about the housing authority throttling back a little bit about the amount of housing that's going to go on that property?
They said, well, I would rather see a large municipal building be put on a big, municipal lot rather than a number of individual housing units for how much water we would use compared to how much water, a housing organization would use. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And also there was something about some formula used for parking.
Yes.
Yep.
That was one of the things that they said, make sure that's at least one parking space for every 400 square feet, but they would defer to local ordinances.
Okay.
But they would prefer to see, adequate parking. The other thing they talked about that we didn't touch was some of the other sources of funding that might become available or might feed into new buildings. One of them being the Build America's Libraries Act. But when I looked at that very briefly this afternoon, it looked like something had to happen before 2024. I'm not sure exactly what that means. And the other was ARPA funding, that maybe more is going to be coming out on sustainability and, issues like that, that it could be used for community buildings, including libraries. And I think those are the main things that we touched upon in the discussion, but also we're encouraged to keep in touch with them. And, they were willing to keep working with us as we go forward, even if it were outside of a grant process, that they would still work with us on if we needed advice on library building programs, things like that.
And I still wish that I would still wish that they would be able to share with us what the competitive components will be so that we can be prepared if we know what the
Sure.
average household is, or free and reduced lunch in the schools, or whatever criteria they're going to use. It would be great for us to know that so that we can prepare.
We can ask that question. We can certainly come back and say, when we presented it, that this was one of the specific things that came up. I'm just going to make a note of it. Competitive criteria.
I
Yes.
put it on our notes, Linda, the document that I've
Yeah.
been taking notes to our notes.
Yeah, good. Anything else that anybody thinks we would like to ask specifically? And certainly if you think of it later, you can send it to us.
One more thing that they also said we should kind of put a bug in people's ear is the longer that we wait to do this project, the higher the
Yes.
escalation costs are, whether it's labor or it's materials. And they were like, maybe that's something that would convince people to move now, to go now, or to go sooner than the next grant round. And that's
True.
what it sounded like when I talked to Mr. Scott, Bill Scott, our new assistant town administrator. He sounded like he was ready to jump over the planning cycle and, whatever, move ahead independently.
Right. They also said that if they go to one grant, construction grant, they would still work with the people on the planning and design aspect of the project. You wouldn't be left to your own devices, but it just wouldn't be a separate thing. There's Will.
Certainly looks happy.
Hi,
Hey,
Will.
Will.
Oh, he isn't on yet. Okay.
He has to unmute.
So is there anything you want to add to this? Will, we've just had a discussion about our meeting with the library planning, MBLC. I'm not quite sure how you want to handle a recap.
No, I don't think
Or
it's
you
necessary.
can watch the recording.
I am here now. I think the meeting should just continue.
Okay, because it is being recorded so that you can always go back and look at it listen to it that way.
So
I
in
also,
your
Will, I
notes
also sent out a summary
on.
of.
George?
Yeah.
George?
Also in your notes, you talked a lot about building consensus. And did they talk about how that's done in other places?
Jane?
Not specifically how it's done in other places, but in general, they did refer to it. A few things is to work with the facts. We already know that. So they said, then keep gathering your facts so that you have a script and you have an elevator speech and you have repeated ideas that you share with the public that becomes more and more of a convincing story. So we already knew that, right? They also said, if you are concerned that folks aren't sure what it would be like to move from this location to another location, start to have collaborative and cooperative programs with the senior center so that folks drive over to that area of town and realize how easy it is to get there. So, I mean, they have a lot of good suggestions that can help us in terms of building consensus. And then, the straight ahead way to do that is to start your communication campaign and start to visit those organizations that are stakeholders and that kind of thing. We know how to do it. We just need to do it.
Right, and I think also the important point that was made in those notes is that a few very loud people can derail this kind of a program real
Yes.
quick.
Well, and we know that happened in the past. So we have to figure out how to try to avoid that situation again.
Mhm.
Anything else? All right, well then, let's move on to the next item, which is the discussion of the 12/6 meeting on, essentially, it's the upcoming housing summit. Mary, do you want to address that?
Sure. I felt as if housing hijacked the meeting. That was, when I left the other meeting, it was going to be a meeting between everybody interested in the land, that they were going to really get folks together. By the time, within a week, Mary decided it would be, she just was going to go ahead and use it as her pre-housing summit meeting. Much to my dismay, there was a meeting in between of the housing authority, some consultant who deals with the housing authority and the age-friendly group. So for me, it just brings up how things can change very quickly and you've got to be at meetings. So I was unhappy, and I'm on as a library person, but I'm also a housing person, so I get it. So the meeting was about the housing summit that's going to happen. And part of a housing summit is for townspeople to identify what housing needs we have. Kathy Green, all the planners were there, and they were clear that they wanted to discuss all housing, not just affordable housing, which was interesting.
It is interesting.
And the selectmen are going to be at the housing summit. And so this was part of a preparation for that. I guess it pointed to me that how quickly things can change and how you have to be focused on what your goal is and try and be present at absolutely any discussion that it's going to take place regarding your agenda. Linda, what were your thoughts?
That's pretty much it. Essentially, there was a Zoom meeting with a consultant who's helping them run this summit. And so it was really the logistics of how they were planning the summit and who was going to do what, who was going to facilitate groups and how the groups were going to work, and then coming together and how, to come up with answers. One thing that I got out of it after the group was speaking with Mary Wagon and asking about, well, how do you communicate with the housing authority and get your thoughts to them about the possibilities of multiple use of that property. I was given the number to contact the person, I guess, that is, I don't know what her title is, but is in charge of the housing authority, and which I will do, and to see if there's a way to get on their agenda or to introduce the idea, or would they ever consider doing something like this. She has tried to pose that to them, that how wonderful it might be to have that property used for a combination of housing and library and possibly fire department, since they are also interested in it. No one from the fire department was at this particular meeting. And essentially, the agenda really did not address the property specifically, but what was going to be happening related to how the town was going to handle the whole housing issue. And that's it.
What's the date of the housing summit?
January 11th.
Thank you.
And supposedly all of the groups that have anything to say about anything like this they've been invited to attend.
Including
So,
the selectmen asked that it take place at 5 versus in the afternoon so that they can attend.
okay.
So,
Anything else?
Is it at the senior center?
yes.
Yes. In their ballroom area.
Diane mentioned it to me the last time I was at the senior center. She said, I hope you're going to come. So
Yes.
that's great.
Okay. So I'll move on to the next item, which is the survey logistics, and Richard and Jane, you want to address that?
Well, we have a survey. I haven't gotten many revisions on it, so I assume it's close to being ready to send up the flagpole. Now we need to just work on the timing and the production for getting it out in the mail and getting it back.
So one
yeah,
of the-
but so the
Go ahead,
whole
Richard.
point, yeah, so the major point was this week we were going to do an unbiased survey using a randomized mailing list. And so the other thing that we were waiting for was the town clerk to weigh in on whether or not we could leverage the existing town databases. And as I understand it, we can do that, but and Jane has to finalize that. But theoretically, once we, again, we have to identify the fields in the format that we would be using to generate that mailing. Also, the cost of that mailing. So we have a rough estimate of what it would cost, and that includes use of volunteer people to help with the data entry, as well as some of the stuffing and so on. And Sue Loveland has previously said that she has a number of people who have already spoken up about helping with that. So as soon as we can finalize what the requirements are from Town Hall, we're going to start assembling materials.
I'm sure the library board would be more than happy to help with that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be that horrible.
And do we have money that we can use for postage or copying? How are we handling that?
I feel like, I don't know why I thought of this all of a sudden, like after our last meeting, but the library has a pretty healthy account that is donations from the public. And I don't see why we couldn't use that money to do a mailing.
Again,
But you want me to
all we have to
verify
do
that?
is, again, I think we just need to make sure, working with the town administrators, that we are in compliance with use of public information, which may have some confidentiality issues, as well as making sure that we know about the funding and that the donation pile would be an appropriate funding source.
Mary?
Yeah, I said, if not this, then what?
Yeah.
That's
Not
my
what,
question.
then?
Okay, I'll wait. I've got items.
Okay. Any other comments that folks have on the survey? Do we have a timeline that you want to get this out?
No, I would like to do it right after the new year.
So if are we planning to have I know we will select a date, but are we thinking of having a January meeting? Do we want to do this before the February meeting? Yeah, I'm just wondering.
And what's the timeline of people getting information back to us, do you think? Are you gonna give them a week or?
Okay, so if you get, yeah, so are you talking about the public or the town administrators?
The public?
Yeah, the public.
Receiving the survey.
Yeah, if you read the presentation that I sent out, it's, the typical timeline is a couple of months,
Okay,
right? So the way that the system that has been used successfully by the National Citizen Survey, there's a pre-mailer that says that you've been selected, followed by the actual mailing, and then followed by a follow-up postcard for those who haven't responded. So it's a four-step process.
mhm.
So we would hope to have our data by when?
March. Yeah, March.
You would get all the responses and all of that? When would you be sending out this pre-postcard and then the survey and then the postcard?
Again, as soon as we can, again, we would be sending that out theoretically right after the holidays, sometime in January.
Yeah, it's not going to be right after the holidays because when nobody's going to be working during the holidays. I mean, I would think mid-January,
Mid-January,
wouldn't
yeah.
you?
Yep,
Mid-January would be the earliest,
right,
but that would be the initial postcard.
right.
And then when would you send out the
So then
survey?
February 1st, you send out the survey.
Okay.
February 15th, you send out a reminder. February 28th, you start to calculate. You've got your calculations throughout the month of March. Or
Okay.
whatever, 2 weeks, and you're done by mid-March, April 1st.
Okay, so
But
what?
I don't like April 1st as a deadline.
No, because
Yeah.
it's tax time.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
don't
April
worry about it.
Fool's
There's
Day.
always something.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is I noticed on the list of groups that have to should be expecting to present to the Board of Selectmen. We're fourth on the list. I don't know that that list means anything.
What are you
but-
talking about?
If you look at the Board of Selectmen's agenda, the stuff that you sent out to us for their meeting tonight.
Oh, so
And
we're
there-
back on the
No,
agenda.
we are not on with a date, but at the very end of the dated part, there is a listing of all of the groups that are supposed to be presenting to them. And we happen to be the fourth one listed. I don't know that there's a priority in this list. But I was wondering if we should think about that as when we would be ready to go to the Board of Selectmen the next time. Should we go with data in hand collected from the survey? Should that be our goal? The meat on the bones that they are asking for, and anything else we have, but specifically that. So does that make sense?
I think so.
What did the rest of you think?
Will and I have both been in front of the Board of Selectmen a lot recently. And I can tell you sort of their schedule is their schedule. They are going to want to have, they're not going to want to have people on the agenda who do not have substantive materials now. And I
That's
think,
what I'm saying.
yeah, no,
that-
sort of if you
So
look
what
at,
we can do in order to anticipate that type of scheduling question is once we talk to Mary Maslowski and we have a list in hand, we talk to whoever the powers that be are going to print whatever we're going to do, that sort of thing. We get the mailing scheduled, then we'll know when we'll have data for them, and then we can get on their agenda.
That's what I was leading up to. Have that as our goal. Does that make sense? In addition to anything else that we are able to achieve by the Housing Summit and by perhaps attending Yarmouth Housing Authority meetings and talking to them, we would at least have the data from our survey.
And then the only other major thing that people are going to be looking for is again, it seems like cost estimates are, which have a basis in fact, are a very big focus based on what I saw from the capital improvement plan. They, so there's the capital improvement or the capital budgeting committee made a point that they would much rather have better, they would prefer to fund feasibility and cost studies as a prerequisite for people actually adding an item to the capital improvement plan. Am I correct in that, Will?
Yeah, and I think we'll hear more tonight in the back and forth, right? In response to that, plus a bunch of other issues, which I think the CBC has started to just gently push, like, hey, why is all this crap coming to us that should be in department budgets? Pardon my French.
No, and also, Richard, when I did my
amongst other things. So, Richard, I don't want to get off tangent, but yes is the answer.
When I did my presentation to CBC, they said that to me too. They said they didn't want those round figures. They wanted more specific, actual. Their favorite thing was the kitchenette because I had a couple estimates in hand from specific vendors who, had provided information with the RFQ from last year and the year before.
Which is totally accurate, Jane. And I think in general, it's just right now it's every department head takes everything and throws it against the CBC wall because that's the process.
And it takes sometimes 8 years to get your
right.
Your
the process is so broken. The good news is that Bill Scott is starting to. He has the machete. He's landed in the middle of the jungle, and he's starting to hack his way out. And so that's literally the analogy I can think of right now of what he's trying to do.
I was very impressed with him at the CBC meeting for how focused he was and how experienced he was and how,
he's done this. Let's just say he expected to see a lot more processes when he got here. And I believe he has been, what's the word? Humbled.
No, he's motivated and he's
okay. Well, I'm just giving you my perspective, Jane. I think he came in here and he was like, holy shit. Okay.
Okay, but we're on camera now.
Right.
I mean, I'm not telling the truth. I'm not telling the truth.
I agree.
Having said all that, and if I understand this, the process, the funding process, something could happen as far in July. So the money that was put in for feasibility study, would that become available to us in July? July 1st, which says to me that that's a goal that we should have to be ready to put out an RFP or Q or whatever it's called to get another study going, whichever ones of the studies we need to do. And I'm assuming that what we had done by JRA is going to be thought to be, is it going to be useful? I mean, do we want to duplicate what they did? Or do we want to bring up to date, maybe the financial data and do the additional traffic engineering operating studies at that time? Mary?
I think that's all premature. I mean, until we have a site, until we have a go time of 3 years out or 5, whatever, to continue to do studies on costs, I think are a waste.
So what is that feasibility study money there for?
Well, I think we have a lot to do. I think that, we keep talking about needing to build consensus, needing to get out in the community, needing to do this, needing to do that. Hey, do we have a marketing plan? Do we need to get a consultant to do a marketing plan? With the plan, how do we know what a slick presentation looks like? What points do we bring up? What pieces do we need to sell to the public? I mean, this is going to be a sales job that we have to do, and I'm not a salesperson. I would need someone to tell me exactly what points I'm supposed to make, we would need to have that slick presentation. So for me, and by the way, Will, I'm really appreciative that I read that the community plan, and there on the last page was the new library. And I'm sure that you had a lot to do with that, making sure it stayed. And for me, that is one of the most exciting things I have seen since I've been on the committee, that it's in a town document that we're looking for a new library in what, 26?
I think so. But again, as Richard said, I appreciate you saying that, Mary. You know, all of this is just advisory / suggestion / I don't know what you call it. So it's really about everything you're saying needs to be repeated, like tonight at the select board meeting. You know, and they need to hear from people, not just the CBC. They need to hear from other folks about what
Like
you just
during
said.
the public comment section?
Yeah.
Ah, good idea.
I mean, because literally what you just said, Mary, is awesome. But you know, this is we're all converts to this cult. So
Right.
like it's about saying it in a different setting. I hope you understand where I'm coming from there.
Well, I do, but I need to see a plan. It would be helpful to have a plan. It would be helpful to have, here are the points. And I know we're collecting a lot of data. We're collecting a lot of information. But I think at some point, you know, we're gonna have to raise a lot of, we're gonna have to raise awareness. We're gonna have to raise a lot of money, and I think you have to have a direction and a sequence of doing things. And I'm not sure what a presentation looks like. But at least I feel we have a lot more information to put in that presentation. Am I making sense? I mean,
Yes.
all right. So, and marketing plans are not cheap. And I would love, Richard, were we supposed to do some kind of budget from what other libraries have done in terms of marketing, in terms of preparing? I mean, I can tell you that 20 years ago, to get ready for a capital campaign was going to cost like $50,000. That's just to get ready for a capital campaign. And that was a long time ago. So I don't know. I don't know I don't know what our process is.
Anybody answer that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct that sort of the numbers are typically pretty big.
I mean, as far as the cost of a new library, we know about the size of library that we need.
Right.
We know about the cost per square foot that it's going to cost.
Right.
And until we have the plan, the place, and the date, I don't know that it makes sense to do much more than that.
So we're going to go from now until when and not have anything substantive to show? When we were talking about a survey, and hopefully by the end of March, we would have data. So then what do we do with that?
We do know, go ahead. Well, we do know about what a new library is going to cost, and we will not know any harder figures till we know where it's going to be. I mean, site development can be a huge percentage of the cost. Does anyone know, if the town gives us land, does that count as part of their contribution?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but I can find out for sure.
I mean, that's pretty critical, because if they're going to,
I think it's only construction. I think all those dollars of the town's portion is construction, eligible costs. Right, Jane? I mean, that's
I'm
how they
pretty sure
describe it,
Linda. Mhm.
eligible costs. So they
Site-
have a list of eligible costs.
And site is not an eligible cost?
I don't believe so.
Okay,
When JRA did their study, they added $1 million in case we had to acquire land in his figures, for relative costs,
right. Well,
comparing two existing locations. And then if we had to come up with a third location and we had to buy it.
well,
So,
until we have site control, it doesn't make sense to work on a building, a building design. And
oh, no.
until you have building design, you don't know what the building is going to cost.
But so then I'm just wondering where we've asked for $50,000. Do we have a plan for that?
Yes, we're going to start, we're going to get, aren't we going to get citizen opinion?
That's part of it.
Outside of the survey?
We execute a communications campaign to gather resident input.
So
right?
they're describing it as a facility study, feasibility study. So we're not doing a feasibility study, are we?
No, a feasibility, if you look it up and if you look into the literature, feasibility studies can go in different directions.
Okay,
You could have a feasibility study to determine if people are in favor of one site or one
Okay.
central site or
Okay.
not. That
Okay.
could be feasibility. You could
Okay.
have a feasibility study to see if they'll vote yes at the ballot, but if we're a little
Okay.
early for that. You can have a feasibility study to see if this lot makes more sense than that lot makes more sense than that. lot.
okay,
You can use it in different ways and it's still called feasibility.
okay. I
And
didn't
actually,
understand
Mr.
all of
Scott-
those.
Mr. Scott had mentioned you could use some money to do a site determination. Like that could be one of the studies.
Okay,
Kane, if someone were to ask, so I'm gonna get a new library and you're telling me we're gonna get a grant, how much money are we gonna get from this grant?
State grants will fund up to 40% of your construction.
Okay, great, thank you.
And they pay up to 50% of your planning and design. Is that right? Or 50?
but that's the old way.
Yeah. Yeah, but
So-
you know what? It's confusing enough. You can make it in general terms.
That's
and say,
another question we should ask, specifically how that percentage is going to change, because I was under the impression it was 45 to 50% of the eligible costs.
Depends on the size of the building, doesn't it? Or the size of the project.
Yeah, it's a regressive formula. So you get a certain percentage of the first $1 million, or the first X dollars, you get 50%. The next, Y dollars, you get a different percent, a lower percent, and then it goes down. So your weighted average goes down the bigger the project.
But that was on the old system, so let's find out if they're using that same formula in any new system. At least that's what I would want to know,
Yeah.
to be able to answer anybody that asks us that question.
Great.
How come in my head, I have basically a third, a third, and a third? A third the town does, a third the state does, and a third we have to do.
Well,
The
was-
state, the town minimum under the current formula is a minimum of 25% of eligible costs.
Okay.
And I would think that a capital campaign doesn't start until you've got some idea of what your costs are going to be. That
Correct.
you don't just start a capital campaign without, something more definite. We're not there yet.
You won't be successful if you do.
Right.
Okay, so what about a marketing plan? I mean, don't we keep on talking about how we need to sell this?
Okay.
Don't we keep talking about how we need to get out to groups and how we have to talk to people about, be it the selectmen, be it Rotary, be it, I don't know, Saturday morning.
Quilters, the knitters.
Yeah, And how do we know what to say to them and what kind of audio, what kind of visuals we should have? How do we know the best way to do that?
Right, you get a marketing consultant to help you do that.
And I assume that is something that couldn't be done until after July?
Depends on what funding sources might be available beforehand, but yes.
From whom?
Donation buckets,
So
other
Richard,
grants.
again, what have the other library, what have
What have
the,
the other libraries done?
and who has, who's helped them with that?
Got it?
It's usually a paid consultant.
Yeah, well, again, rather than guess, let's collect the information and then we'll review it at the upcoming meeting. If not before, because we can always send each other stuff.
Right. So we have some tasks ahead of us.
Yeah.
And those are going to fall to whom? Richard and Jane? Is that
Richard's
something
Yeah,
that you would need to be involved with as far as
at this point, yes.
perhaps other librarians that have been successful? Eastham, maybe? Or even West Tisbury?
You know, it's a little different now, I heard somebody say this morning, post-pandemic, and I thought that was kind of funny. Whatever people did 5 or 8 years ago needs to be updated to today's economy and today's society, that kind of thing. But I certainly have a lot of different sources of how other successful communities have done this project.
I would say,
And like we said, we were going to talk to Jeff Colby, right? We're going to talk to our DPW friend, and you know,
We did.
And
We did talk to him, and I didn't get much more out of our conversation and the tour other than to go to the community groups to send out the surveys. Unless you think there's more that he would.
well, my question is, did he do that all himself? Did he do those?
I don't think so. I think they had a consultant, or they had some sort of, you
Right,
know,
so that's the question, right there.
yeah. So I'll ask.
Okay, great.
Okay.
The same with Kathy Williams sending out all the information that had to do with the visioning project. That was a paid effort. I don't know who she hired.
Okay, well, let's get some names of folks that have done this before so that we can talk to them and see what we're looking at, because even the process of contracting with someone is going to be a big deal.
It is.
Well, right. And we'd have to do an RFQ, which we did for the other consultant. What about Cheryl Bryan, Jane? Is she still available as a consultant?
I'm not sure, but I can find out.
And if she isn't, perhaps she knows someone and we could find out from her what the process should be.
Well, and same with asking Lauren and Andrea. Definitely. They used to put out a list of consultants, you know, for construction and planning projects. I'm sure they still have that information.
So we should probably be able to get some answers to those kinds of questions before the next scheduled meeting. You think that's fair?
So, and I would like to hear, Will, I'm taken by the notion of, you know, what should I be making an appointment with each selectman and telling them that among my dreams for my town is a new library?
I don't think that's a terrible idea. I mean, they sometimes have office hours, so you don't have to make appointments. You could match it up with theirs. I also think that coming out and saying things in public, like tonight or in a future conversation at the select board meetings, I don't see how it could be a negative.
Yeah.
I think it can only be a positive.
To my knowledge, only Mark Forrest has office hours. Is that true, Will?
Well, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess in my mind, I was like, well, Mark does it, so everybody must do it. But I'm guessing that you're probably right about that. I guess it's only Mark.
again, for me, it would be really helpful if I was given a list of things that I should do, and I'm mindful of strategy and timing. So, I mean, should each of us take a month, and that's when we go to the select board and talk about how this is important to us? Do we write letters? I'm just looking for an action plan for me and as an individual and us as a group and any other supporters.
One of the things I know specifically that Bill Scott talked about is part of in a situation where he was in another community. There was a minority, very vocal group that had was working against a project that he was involved in. He was able to actually engage the people who were in support of it, and they collected. So it was a it's when you sign up, petition. So he literally had, when it came time for the presentation to their board of selectmen, the people who were against the program had their petition of 200 people against it, and his group showed up with 2,000, and it passed. So that's another part of the marketing plan. It's really, when we get down to it's that we need to have the network that when it comes time to say, should we move forward, we need the names on the dotted line.
Yes, and I don't want to peak too early either. I
Right.
mean, the timing is really important. Will, I'm a little discouraged if you're saying that the actual statement of a new library in the visioning plan does not mean that Yarmouth envisions a new library.
No, I wouldn't say you should be discouraged. I think there's two different things. I think one is that the visioning process itself through the planning board contemplates a new library, and it will continue to do that as long as I'm a part of it. But in terms of what the CBC plan says, that is a much more diffuse, what's the word I'm looking for? Nebulous, look into the deep, dark future. So I do think it's a good thing that it's on the visioning plan, and it will be on the visioning plan. But I think the CBC process is so broken that I wouldn't, while I think it's important and I will do what I can to maintain it being on there in the year 26 or 27 or whatever it's going to be, Mary, that has a lot more fungibility to it as the process itself is going to start to change with the new assistant town administrator. But I think like you said, it's on all of these fronts. It's also at the the land disposition committee front. It's at the it's a multiple pronged. It's having flyers at the town meeting last month. Like, it's all of it. So I'm not trying to. I guess I did try to make one seem less bad or better than the other, but at the same time, it's all of it. I don't know. I'm sorry to be vague, but I don't want you to be discouraged. I think it's just about multiple impressions, like in marketing. How many times do you have to hear something before you remember it? Probably 7. In the case of our town, 7,000. So I think the more people are hearing new library, they're just kind of like, oh, I guess we're having a new library.
I agree.
Is that helpful? I hope so.
Well, I hope that's true. But I also agree that a frustration for me has been trying to figure out or find out how this town works.
Well, I mean, I think the best example is Jeff Colby. I mean, here's somebody who just got a $18 million, was it 18? You got a tens of millions of dollars building built.
$17 million.
Okay, and we're talking about something that's 50% of that. So I mean, maybe less. I don't know. But the point is, like, there is an example of somebody using a public-private public town state partnership to get something done, and they had an activated group of people, like you said, Mary, that had a plan. So maybe instead of one, maybe we just go to the nice people, and I think we already have, who were on the friends of the new DPW building, and basically get their playbook and not make this so hard.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe we've already done that. So.
We haven't, but I like that.
And maybe the town of Eastham also, their playbook, because they were literally doing a library, whereas a DPW building, but again, there's some similarities because the Yarmouth ins and outs are not the Eastham ins and outs. So.
Anybody on this group have experience writing a marketing plan?
You need someone to do that unless you're a marketing expert. I don't think it's something you look up on the internet and plug in.
Oh, I worked in advertising before I worked in libraries. I mean, I know what the steps are, and I think we could probably build one among the 6 of us or 7 of us.
But here's the big but. We have a bias. And a good marketing professional takes inputs and puts them in what I would describe as a better package. And I just sort of look at the difference and sort of, looking also, for example, we did a presentation from the golf committee, and it was, in the end, it just didn't hit the mark. And
I was there.
Yeah, and so, sometimes you just have to say, I need help.
Well, okay. Well, all right. So I'll look forward to hear what you guys find out next meeting. Thank you.
So we have tasks then that people are comfortable with. Richard and Jane, it seems like you have most of it. What about the rest of us? Is there something that each of us should be doing?
I think, as we said earlier in the meeting, being at the table for these various meetings, whether it's planning or it's land use or it's capital budget, and we're doing that. We're doing, I think.
Yeah, so, and just so that's the important part. Be there. Be at the table.
Okay. So continue doing what we're doing so far, and any other opportunity that we have, jump into it. That what we're comfortable with?
Yes, and if folks know of some place that we should be, I'm happy. Please give me an opportunity to try to be there.
Okay. All right.
Well, we also said that we need a script and we need an elevator speech or whatever. We started with a little FAQ document. We're going to build on that. I would keep writing and keep thinking and keep focusing on what the anticipated questions are.
I haven't checked the library website recently, but are those Q&As on the library website? Have we got those up?
They still aren't up there, but between Trish and Thomas and I, they will be by the end of the week.
That would be great, because that's at least something that we can refer people to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And use that language also. And as questions come up, those are the kinds of things that should be added, and we develop the language for each of us to use.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Yep. Again, go back to Norwell and look at their list of FAQs, and it's very impressive.
Right.
All we have to do is copy and paste and change the name.
Right.
Just
Linda, would it be possible for us to, in each of our meetings now, when we have January and February, to do a couple of those questions and just rattle it around among the 7 or 6 of us and get the right answer? I so agree with Mary that a script is so critical to us. And even if we took a little piece of time and dealt with that particular question and get the answer that we all are very comfortable with, and that's done. And then we do the next question and the next question.
Okay, sure.
Good idea, George.
Sure.
We have homework now.
Okay, that's fine. We'll start with January and we'll figure out which ones we feel we need to address. And if there are any new things that in your conversations that need to be an answer created. The next thing would have been to choose the next meeting date, but Mary, you said you had some things. Did you want to
Nope,
speak to?
that was it.
Oh, that was it. Okay. So I guess the next thing should be to choose the next meeting date.
The
Richard, do you have a calendar?
The 11th is not good because that is the housing summit and
Right.
I have a land disposition at 1 o'clock theoretically.
Same day?
Yep.
I would propose the 18th, which would be the following week.
The day after a Monday holiday, but I'm
That's
fine with
that's
that.
all right. You know, it's just a day after a Monday holiday.
Easy
That
for you
works
to
for
say
me.
you're retired.
That
Yeah,
works
yeah,
for
yeah.
me.
Works for me too.
And looking ahead, probably in February, the day after Valentine's Day, the 15th.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that we get a double trifecta.
Right.
Minutes to follow.
Okay. So that works.
Is it a 4 p.m.?
Yes.
Does that work? Or is that not good for you?
It's
Will?
okay. Yeah,
Okay.
it's okay. So
Okay.
January 18th and February.
15.
15th.
Thank you.
Valentine's Day is the 14th, Will.
Right, that's why I said.
Well, I know. I
forget
just
that.
wanted to make sure I heard it right.
Are we gonna continue on Zoom? How long can we go on Zoom?
You know, at the rate, if I was listening to the Board of Health presentation, or will be listening, we may be Zooming permanently for the next several
Right.
months.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, it seems as, hold on a second, Mary, keep that thought. It just seems like that we were able to get people, if we continue on Zoom, harder to get to another place and fit it into other
Yeah.
things you're doing.
I would say if there is no Zoom option, it makes it just tricky for me.
I
But
know.
Oh, I
Who
was
cares
talking
about
about,
me?
I
It's a
thought
committee.
there was a limit on the extension from the state, that's all, for open meeting law, so.
Well, I'm guessing that is going to change.
Yeah.
And I would think that that word would come from the town.
Mhm.
And also, you know, there's the hybrid option too. But that doesn't, you know, that allows for Will, where your schedule is more difficult to come in person, would be able to do something like that. So let's just have, I think we just go from month to month.
Yep.
I
Okay.
would just assume we're meeting on Zoom until somebody tells me otherwise.
Tells differently, yeah. Mary, you had your hand up?
Yes, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I was second that.
Do we have to do roll call?
You do, but just say yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, yes?
Yes.
Everybody say yes?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes, and
Yes.
yes, okay. All right,
Done.
thank you, everyone.
Have a good holiday,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Happy
Happy
holiday.
holidays.
Merry New
Happy
Year.
everything.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
Happy
everything.
happy
later.
holidays.